Hello there, thank you for clicking on this video. Your time is valuable, so we are super grateful that you are giving our little channel a chance. Any feedback is appreciated. Enjoy the story. The War of the Worlds by hgwells. Chapter 3 on Horsewell Common. I found a little crowd of perhaps 20 people surrounding the huge hall in which the cylinder lay. I have already described the appearance of the colossal bulk embedded in the ground. The turf and gravel about it seemed charged as if by a sudden explosion. No doubt its impact had caused a flash of fire. Henderson and Ogilvy were not there. I think they perceived that nothing was to be done for the present and had gone away to breakfast at Henderson's house. There were 4 or 5 boys sitting on the edge of the pit, with their feet dangling and amusing themselves until I stopped them by throwing stones at the giant mass. After I had spoken to them about it, they began playing at touch in and out of the group of bystanders. Among these were a couple of cyclists, a jobbing gardener I employed sometimes, a girl carrying a baby, Greg the butcher and his little boy, and 2 or 3 loafers and golf caddies who were accustomed to hang about the rail station. There was very little talking. Few of the common people in England had anything but the vaguest astronomical ideas in those days. Most of them were staring quietly at the big table-like end of the cylinder, which was still as Ogilvy and Henderson had left it. I fancy the popular expectation of a heap of charged corpus was disappointed at this inanimated bulk. Some went away while I was there, and other people came. I clambered into the pit and fancied I heard a faint movement under my feet. The top had certainly ceased to rotate. It was only when I got thus close to it that the strangeness of this object was at all evident to me. At the first glance it was really no more exciting than an overturned carriage or a tree blown across the road. Not as much so, indeed. It looked like a rusty gas flow. It required a certain amount of scientific education to perceive that the grey scale of the thing was not a common oxide, that the yellowish-white metal that gleamed in the crack between the lid and the cylinder had an familiar hue. Extraterrestrial had no meaning for most of the onlookers. At that time it was quite clear on my own mind that the thing had come from the planet Mars, but I judged it impossible that it contained any living creature. I thought that unscrewing might be automatic. In spite of Ogilvy, I still believed that there were men in Mars. My mind ran fancifully on the possibility of its containing manuscript, on the difficulties in translating that might arise wherever we should find coins and models in it, and so forth. Yet it was a little too large for assurance on this idea. I felt an impatience to see it open. About 11, as nothing seemed happening, I walked back full of such thoughts to my home in Maybury. But I found it difficult to get work upon my abstract investigations. In the afternoon, the appearance of Comor had altered very much. The early edition of the evening paper had startled London with enormous headlines. A message received from Mars, remarkable story from Woking, and so forth. In addition, Ogilvy's wire to the Astronomical Exchange had roused every observatory in the 3 kingdoms. There were half a dozen flyers or more from the Woking station standing in the road by the sand pit. There were half a dozen fleas or more from the Woking station standing in the road by the sand pit. A basket chaise from Hookham and a rather lordly carriage. Besides that, there was quite a heap of bicycles. In addition, a large number of people must have walked in spite of the heat of the day, from Woking and Chertsey, so that there was altogether a quite considerable crowd, 1 or 2 gaily dressed ladies among the others. It was glaringly hot, not a cloud in the sky, nor a breath of wind, and the only shadow was that of the few scattered pine trees. The burning heaters had been extinguished, but the level ground towards Otorsoa was blackened as far as one could see, and still giving off vertical streams of smoke. An enterprising sweet-stuff dealer in the Chopham Road had sent up his son with a bottle load of green apples and ginger beer. Going to the edge of the pit, I found it occupied by a group of about half a dozen men, Henderson, Ogilvy, and a tall, fair-haired man that I afterward learned was Stan, the astronomer royal, with several workmen wielding spades and pickaxes. Stan was giving direction in a clear, high-pitched voice. He was standing on the cylinder, which was now evidently much cooler. His face was crimson and streaming with perspiration, and something seemed to have irritated him. A large portion of the cylinder had been uncovered, though its lower end was still embedded. As soon as Ogilvy saw me among the staring crowd on the edge of the pit, he called me to come down, and asked me if I would mind going over to see Lord Hilton, the lord of the manor. The growing crowd, he said, was becoming a serious impediment to their excavation, especially the boys. They wanted a light railing put up and help to keep the people back. He told me that the faint stirring was occasionally still audible within the case, but that the workmen had failed to unscrew the top, as it afforded no grip to them. The case appeared to be enormously thick, and it was possible that the faint sounds we heard represented a noisy tumble in the interior. I was very glad to do as he asked, and so became one of the privileged spectators within the contemplated enclosure. I failed to find Lord Hilton at his house, but I was told he was expected from London by the 6 o'clock train from Waterloo, and as it was then about 5:15, I went home, had some tea, and walked up to the station to waylay him. Chapter 4. The cylinder opens. When I returned to the common, the sun was setting. Scattered groups were hurrying from the direction of walking, and 1 or 2 persons were returning. The crowd about the pit had increased and stood out black against the lemon yellow of the sky. A couple of hundred people, perhaps. There were raised voices, and some sort of struggle appeared to be going on about the pit. Strange imaginings passed through my mind. As I drew near, I heard Stan's voice. "Keep back! Keep back!" A boy came running towards me. "It's a moving," he said to me as he passed. "A screwing and a screwing out? I don't like it. I'm going home." "Oh man, I'm going home, I am." I went on to the crowd. There were really, as I should think, 200 or 300 people elbowing and jostling one another. The 1 or 2 ladies were being by no means the least active. "He has fallen in the pit!" cried someone. "Keep back," said several. The crowd swayed a little, and I elbowed my way through. Everyone seems greatly excited. I heard a peculiar humming sound from the pit. "I say," said Ogilvy, "help keeps this idiot back. We don't know what is it in the confined thing, you know." I saw a young man, a shop assistant, in walking, I believe he was, standing on the cylinder and trying to scramble out of the hole again. The crowd had pushed him in. The end of the cylinder was being unscrewed out from within. Nearly 2 feet of shining screw projected. Somebody blundered against me, and I narrowly missed being pitched onto the top of the screw. I turned, and as I did so, the screw must have come out, for the lid of the cylinder fell upon the gravel with a ringing concussion. I stuck my elbow into the person behind me and turned my head towards the thing again. For a moment, that circular cavity seemed perfectly black. I had sunset in my eyes. I think everyone expected to see a man emerge, possibly something a little unlike us, terrestrial men, but in all essentials, a man. I know I did. But looking, I presently saw something stealing within the shadows, greyish, billowy movements, and one above another, and then two luminous discs like eyes. Then something resembling a little grey snake, about thickness of a walking stick, coiled up out of the writing middle and wriggled in the air towards me, and then another. Sudden chill came over me. There was a loud shriek from a woman behind. I half turned, keeping my eyes fixed upon the cylinder still, from which another tentacles were now projecting, and began pushing my way back from the edge of the pit. I saw astonishment giving place to horror on the faces of the people about me. I heard inarticulated exclamation on all sides. There was a great movement backwards. I saw the shopman struggling still on the edge of the pit. I found myself alone, and I saw the people on the other side of the pit running off, stand among them. I looked again at the cylinder, and ungovernable terror gripped me. I stood petrified and staring. A big greyish, rounded bulk, the size perhaps of a bear, was raising slowly and painfully out of the cylinder. As it bulged up and caught the light, it glistened like wet weather. Two large dark-colored eyes were regarding me steadfastly. The mass that framed them, the head of the thing, was rounded and had, one might say, a face. There was a mouth under the eyes, the lipless brim of which quivered and painted and dropped saliva. The whole creature heaved and pulsated convulsively. Long tentacle appendage gripped the edge of the cylinder. Another swayed in the air. Those who never seen a living Martian can scarcely imagine the strange horror of its appearance. The peculiar V-shaped mouth with its pointed upper lip, the absence of brow ridges, the absence of chin beneath the wedge-like lower lip, the incessant quivering of the mouth, the gorgon group of tentacles, the tumultuous breathing of the lungs in a strange atmosphere, the evident heaviness and painfulness of movement due to the greater gravitational energy of the earth. Above all, the extraordinary intensity of its immense eyes were at once vital, intense, unhuman, crippled, and monstrous. There was something fungoid in the oily brown skin, something in the clumsy deliberation of the tedious movements unspeakably nasty. Even at this first encounter, this first glimpse, I was overcome with disgust and dread. Suddenly, the monster vanished. It had toppled over the brim of the cylinder and had fallen into the pit with thud-like fall of a great mass of leather. I hear it giving a peculiar thick cry, and forthwith another of these creatures appeared darkly in the deep shadow of the aperture. I turned and, running madly, made for the first ground of trees, perhaps 100 yards away. But I ran flauntingly and stumbling, for I could not avert my face from these things. There, among some young pine trees and furze bushes, I stopped painting and waited further developments. The common round of some pit was dotted with people, standing like myself in a half-fascinated terror, staring at this creature, or rather at the heaped gravel at the edge of the pit in which they lay. And then, with a renewed horror, I saw a round black object bobbing up and down on the edge of the pit. It was the head of the shopman who had fallen it, but showing as a little black object against the hot western sun. Now he got his shoulder and knee up, and again he seemed to slink back until only his head was visible. Suddenly he vanished, and I could have fancied a faint shriek had reached me. I had a momentary impulse to go back and help him, that my fears overloaded. Everything was then quite invisible, hidden by the deep pit and the heap of sand that the fall of the cylinder had made. Everyone coming along the road from Chapham or walking could have been amazed at the sight. A dwindling multitude of perhaps 100 people or more standing in a great irregular circle, in ditches, behind bushes, behind gates and hedges, saying little to one another, and in a short, excited shouts, and staring hard at the few heaps of sand. The barrel of ginger beer stood, a queer derelict, black against the burning sky, and in the sandpit was a row of deserted vehicles, with their horses feeding out of nosebags or ploughing the ground. Chapter 5. The Heat Ray. After the glimpse I had at the Martian emerging from the cylinder in which they had come to the Earth from their planet, a kind of fascination paralyzed my action. I remained standing knee-deep in the earth, staring at the mound that hid them. I was battleground of fear and curiosity. I did not dare to go back towards the pit, but I felt a passionate longing to peer into it. I began walking, therefore, in a big curve, seeking some point of advantage, and continuously looking at the sand heap that hid these newcomers to our earth. Once a leash of thin black whip, like the arm of an octopus, flashed across the sunset and was immediately drawn, and afterwards a thin rod rose up by joint, bearing at its apex a circular disc that spun with a wobbling motion. What could be doing on there? Most of the spectators had gathered in one or two groups, one a little crowd towards walking, and the other knot of people in direction to Chapham. Evidently, they shared my mental conflict. There were few near me. One man I approached. He was, I perceived, a neighbor of mine, though I did not know his name, and accosted. But it was scarcely time for articulated conversation. "What an ugly brute!" he said. "God good, what ugly brutes!" he repeated, this time over and over again. "Did you see a man in a pit?" I said, but he made no answer to that. We became silent and stood watching for a time side by side, deriving, I fancy, a certain comfort in one another's company. Then I shifted my position to a little knoll that gave me the advantage of a yard or more of elevation, and when I looked for him, presently he was walking towards Woking. The sunset faded to twilight before anything further happened. The crowd far away on the left towards Woking seemed to grow. I heard now a faint murmur from it. The little knot of people toward Chapham disappeared. There was scarcely an intimation of movement from the pit. It was this, as much as anything, that gave people courage, and I suppose the new arrival from Woking also helped to restore confidence. At any rate, as the dusk came on, slow, intermittent movement upon the sand began, a movement that seemed to gather forth as the stillness of the evening about the cylinder remained unbroken. Vertical black figures in cloths and streets would advance, stop, watch, and advance again, receding out as they did so in a thin, irregular crescent that promised to enclose the pit in its attenuated horns. I too, on my side, began to move towards the pit. Then I saw some cabmen and others had walked boldly into the sandpit and heard the clatters of hoofs and the grate of wheels. I saw a lad trundling off the barrow of apples, and then, within 30 yards of the pit, advancing from the direction of Horsewell, I noticed a little black knot of men, the foremost of whom was waving a white flag. This was the deputation. There would be hasty consultation, and since the Martians were evidently, in spite of their repulsive form, intelligent creatures, it had been resolved to show them, by approaching them with signals, that we too were intelligent. Flutter went the flag, first to the right, then to the left. It was too far for me to recognize anyone there, but afterwards I learned that Ogilvy, Stand, and Handers were with others in this attempt at communication. This little group had in its advance dragged on inward, so to speak, the circumference of the new almost complete circle of people, and a number of dumb black figures followed it at discreet distances. Suddenly there was a flash of light, and a quantity of luminous greenish smoke came out of the pit in 3 distinct puffs, which drove up one after another, straight into the still air. This smoke, or flames perhaps, would be the better word for it, was so bright that the deep blue sky overhead and the hazy stretches of brown common towards the Chertsey, set with black pine tree, seemed to darken abruptly as these puffs arose, and to remain in darkness after their dispersal. At the same time, a faint hissing sound became audible. Beyond the pit stood a little wedge of people, with the white flag at its apex, arrested by this phenomena, a little knot of small vertical black shapes upon black ground. As the green smoke arose, their faces flushed out pale green and faded again as it vanished. Then, slowly, the hissing passed into humming, into a long, loud, droning noise. Slowly a humped shape rose out of the pit, and the ghost of the beam of light seemed to flicker out from it. Forthwith flashes of actual flame, a bright glare leaping from one to another, sprung from the scattering group of men. It was as some invisible jet impinged upon them and flashed into white flames. It was as if each man was suddenly and momentarily turned to fire. Then, by the light of their own destruction, I saw them struggling and falling, and their supporters turning to run. I stood staring, as yet realizing that this was death leaping from man to man in the little distant crowd. All I felt was that it was something very strange, an almost noiseless and blending flash of light, and a man fell headlong and lay still. And as the unseen shaft of heat passed over them, pine trees burst into fire, and every dry furze bush became with one dull thud of massive flames, and far away, towards Nap Hill, I saw the flashes of trees and hedges and wooden buildings suddenly set alight. It was whipping around swiftly and steadily, this flaming death, this invisible, inevitable sword of heat. I perceived it coming towards me by the flashing bushes it touched, and was too astonished and stupefied to stir. I heard the crackle of fire in the sandpit and the sudden squeal of horses that was suddenly still. Then it was as if the invisible ear and this intensely heated finger were drawn towards the heater between me and the Martian, and all along a curving line beyond the sandpit, the dark ground smoked and crackled. Something fell with a crash far away to the left, where the road from walking station opens out to the common. Forthwith an hissing and humming ceased, and the black doom-like object sank slowly out of sight into the pit. And all this had happened with such swiftness that I stood motionless, dumbfounded and dazzled by the flash of light. Had that death swept through full circle, it must inevitably have slain me in my surprise, but it passed and spared me, and left the night about me suddenly dark and unfamiliar. The undoubting common seemed now dark almost to blackness, except where its roadways lay grey and pale under the deep blue sky of the early night. It was dark, and suddenly void of men. Overhead, the stars was mustering, and in the west the sky was still a pale, bright, almost greenish blue. The top of the pine trees and the roofs of Horsell came out sharp and black against the western afterglow. The Martian and their appliance were altogether invisible, save for that thin mast upon which their restless mirror wobbled. The patches of bush and isolated trees here and there smoked and glowed still, and the houses towards walking station were sending up fires of flames into the stillness of the evening air. Nothing was changed save for the terrible astonishment. The little group of black specks with a flag of white had been swept out of existence, and the stillness of the evening, so it seemed to me, had scarcely been broken. It came to me that I was upon this dark common, helpless, unprotected, and alone. Suddenly, like a thing fallen upon me from without, came fear. With an effort, I turned and began a stumbling run to the heater. The fear I felt was no rational fear, but panic, terror, not only of the Martians, but of the dusk and stillness all about me. Such an extraordinary effect unmanning me it had that I ran weeping silently as a child might do. Once I had turned, I did not dare to look back. I remembered I felt an extraordinary persuasion that I was being played with, that presently, when I was upon the very edge of safety, the mysterious death, as swift as the passage of the light, would leap after me from the pit about the cylinder and strike me down. This is the end of today's story. I hope that these past minutes helped you relax and ease you in falling asleep. If you are not 100% there yet, let us just do a breathing exercise. Count mentally with me your breath intakes and exhales. Concentrate on the count, nothing more. Intake 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and release 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. In 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Out 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Intake 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and release 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. In 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Out 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Intake 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and release 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. In 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Out 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Intake 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and release 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. In 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Out 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. In 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Out 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3.